it's Robert Dunt from ArtTop10.com, and I'm really excited to be here today with Alexander Hinks and Juliette Losq. And you guys have done this crazy Model Maquette exhibition that we're in, haven't you?
Yes, yes.
Team effort.
Team effort. So tell me a bit about it. Alex, first of all, how did this thing
originally we saw this as Juliette's idea, but together we both be able to create something quite magical, and so it's really varied throughout the whole show. And we look forward to giving you a tour. So.
Nice. And so, Juliette, why is it called Model Maquette?
It does what it says on the tin, really. So we have selected a range of artists that either build models and reference those in their work, or they use maquettes and create something else from the maquette.
Okay.
So maquette acts as a kind of a sketch, almost, for something else.
Okay, so when you say maquette, what do you mean? Like a maquette as a mini model?
A mini version of something that could be a maquette.
Okay.
So something that you would then enlarge, or something that you build.
Stage sets.
Okay, so like a mini stage design.
So we've got quite a lot of artists that are building these sort of miniature stage sets and then doing different things with them. So that would be an example of a maquette.
Okay, nice, cool. Right, so why the idea, Alex?
I guess Juliette, it's been quite integral to your practice over the last few years.
The past couple of years I've been building models and then either enlarging them into big...
Such as that gigantic thing in the background, I think.
or making drawings from them, so kind of using them in different ways.
Okay.
And then through doing that I came across the work of other artists that were doing that. I already knew some of the artists anyway.
Okay.
But through researching, came across other practices that were using maquettes and models in different ways, and it just became something I was really interested in.
Cool.
And I can't remember how we ended up talking about it, but we must have been talking about it.
I think I'd discussed giving you the opportunity to do a show here, and then you realised that I know if we teamed up together, I know the space very well, and also I know it's one of those shows again where I felt am I being taken out of my comfort zone, but then again with me trying to leave the canvas and have the concept of expanded painting, this exhibition has given me the opportunity to again really push my practice. And
it flowed into where you were going with your practice anyway.
And it's been an ideal opportunity.
Nice, cool. Right, well let's go and have a look around this craziness.
Yeah.
So Alex, I think there's quite a sneaky piece hidden out here somewhere, isn't there?
There is
part of the exhibition.
Actually, dotted around the gallery. There's 3 of Thomas J. Ridley's painted bronze pieces.
Cool.
And if you look inside this little window here, you'll see a homeless man in this quite rundown antique window, and I felt it was quite a fitting space for a work of that size.
It's a really cool little spot for it.
Yeah.
What's it made of?
So it's bronze, which is then painted probably with a model paint. Probably you'd use on your paper on your aeroplanes, or model aeroplanes. And
that's really cool.
It's also lovely out here. We've got the wisteria at the minute. Beautiful time of year.
It is.
And also, ideally, having a show at this time of the year, we gets to do a bit of invigilating in the sun again.
In the sun, invigilating. Living the dream, baby.
Exactly. Yeah. As we go on inside,
let's go on inside.
The first thing that people will see is my uncle Bob Hinks. He founded Asylum Special Effects.
Okay, cool.
So it started out with him just doing a piece for Kellogg's with Snap, Crackle and Pop jumping out of the box, and they got that commission and then just went from there and ended up creating one of the world's biggest special effects model making companies for movies, and it's called Asylum. So if you go on YouTube, there's some wonderful videos that show examples of what they've done, really high end. And here we have his festival model, which was a commission for event Wi-Fi that provide events for outdoors events.
Okay, it looks really cool. Is that?
This festival scene has really increased their sales for these fairs that they do. But then also I've then taken it and made it into an artwork, and conceptually in these times I know festivals are packed away at the minute, and this piece is displayed in a fly case. You could take it as whether it's being unpacked or packed, but hopefully it's being unpacked at the minute.
Hopefully it's being unpacked. That's quite freaky. So this is it's like a design for how the festival would be set up, is it?
It's just an example of a festival, and so you have these scale models, which so the people were the right scale to all the cars. He's hand painted all of the figures.
No way.
And then carefully struck them down. So all of the tents he's made himself, And so I know when he was running sort of Asylum, sort of he was all in the office doing mainly sort of admin and so on, and sort of looking for sort of potential new clients. When since sort of selling that company, he's now got back in the workshop and started making things again.
So wait, so you made this for the show?
No,
or just
so it
for
was
fun?
a commission for a company.
Oh, it was a commission.
Sort
Okay,
of, and then sort of kindly Event Wi-Fi have consigned the work to the show, and it's been couriered here by them. So
nice.
Just got to make sure that sort of no one breaks anything, so otherwise my poor uncle's got to fix it before sending it back. But
I like the sort of Stonehenge bit.
It's
The magic stone section.
Yeah,
For
and
the hippies.
the tree line too links through to sort of Juliette's piece too.
Oh, that's actually
So
really
there's
clever.
A lovely connection there.
That's really clever, actually.
Also, so this whole sort of foyer of the exhibition is sort of extremely sort of colourful. So you have Patrick O'Sutherland's sort of architectural sort of MDF painted bas relief wall pieces.
Oh, I've seen some of these before, haven't I?
Yeah. And so here he actually has this sort of thick gloss paint sort of set against sort of the matte finish, and sort of also the idea of sort of these straight edges, but then shadows creating curves.
Yeah.
And no, it's a really successful piece. Sort of,
It's really good. Actually, I really like this. That really adds a nice contrast. Actually, the colour's really beautiful, but you've got really nice shadows. It's really cool. But this just sets it off quite nicely against the rest of it, doesn't it?
And it's also sort of, when I've spoken to him recently, he's been showing me a few more works, and sort of he's got a few interesting things coming up too. So
That's really cool.
And
then we've got some rather special ethereal resin pieces by someone here.
So this was kind of a sort of a side project from my main piece in the show. And so that sort of, the main piece consists of sort of 200 triangles, which will each have to be individually installed. When these are set sort of connected pieces, which are sort of, they're usually seen as sort of one entity, but at the moment they're installed as a sort of a triptych, sort of with this sort of gaseous floating space, as if they're sort of emerging off from here. And there's a nice relationship between them. Sort of.
No, they're really cool. They're really weird. I actually like this weird straight edge on that one.
Well, it is great. So the fluidity set against the hard structure ties into my paintings, but they're completely different entities.
Yeah, they've got a weird vibe of their own.
Yeah.
And then it's like a diplodocus.
Yeah. So we could get you on the psychiatrist.
All right. Oh yeah.
Down here we have
wow, that's so cool. I hadn't realised that.
Pieces. So yes, sort of a Asturian sort of jacket, sort of on some bedroom floor.
And that's made out of steel, I was going to say.
Bronze. Bronze.
Yes.
Hand painted bronze. And
that is really cool.
So there's another one of these hidden around the gallery that we'll come across later on.
I've seen it. But I hadn't realised that was a jacket. That is actually really funky.
Yeah, they're beautifully made. So he used to work at Madame Tussauds, and so it was ideal to get him in a sort of model maquette exhibition.
Yeah, of course. That's really funky.
Yeah.
It's really, really cool.
And then, also in the foyer we have
another one of the
sort of Isabel Young's pieces. And this is, you won't be able to capture it on film, but if you look carefully, there's a mirror that frames your pupil. And so it's a wonderful little water element.
Oh, that's really weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah,
cool.
so it's wonderful. So
yeah. Extraordinary.
And so inside there's this little rock, but then because of the scale with the ladders, it could be a cliff.
Oh, it could be a massive rock.
Yeah.
Actually, it's quite weird. You can't actually. It's sort of designed for you to have to peer into it, isn't it? Top bit, which is quite clever.
Yep. And here, Gail's got her installation upstairs, and we were talking about having sort of a printout of a street sign diverted traffic. But then we decided it'd be much better.
Just steal a sign.
Well, yeah, I should have stolen a sign, but I bought it off Amazon.
Did you buy it off Amazon?
Yeah, I did. Yeah. So it got delivered yesterday. So everyone on the open weekend sort of missed out on seeing this. But we've still got the show's still on for 2 more weeks, and so I thought it was worth the investment.
How much does it cost to buy it?
It was about £30.
Oh, okay.
So not too bad. But then also I had to think of how to actually hang it on the wall. But so I'm quite good at these things. So a bit of brainstorming. And
once the show's finished, you can just mess up the traffic outside the streets, can't you? A free fun.
Completely.
Oh, bizarre.
Let's continue down
let's
the
continue.
foyer area. So here we have another sort of Mark Beattie's stunning watercolour pieces.
Yeah, these are amazing, these watercolours, aren't they?
Yeah, and so as we said earlier, there's that figurative element, and these are actually his hands wrapped in tape, which he's probably then photographed, and then from that used as a reference to paint.
Yeah, they're quite freaky. What's that? Is that actually his hand? That bit there?
Potentially, yeah.
He's kept it sort of grey, but
I
suppose he wants to keep. Is he carefully photoed it in shadow, or do you think he's...
Well, I think, that grey is, because you definitely got the lights coming from this side here, and then I guess in this gap here you always can have that dark void.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually really cool. It's quite strange how the letters change and crinkle and crisp, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're really cool pieces.
Yeah, here's another one by Suzanne Moxhay.
Yeah, really cool.
So we discussed this earlier.
Yeah, we've got that video with her as well.
It was amazing hearing about how all the sort of birds and leaves were dangling on bits of string with white wire that sort of
I thought it was interesting that all three were based in the loft. I didn't know that. I didn't think they were the same space. I thought they were. I didn't know where they were, but I didn't think they were at all connected spatially. So. I'd like to find out where her studio is, because it sounds quite...
Actually, you could
nice,
do some drawings of that loft.
Yes, definitely.
But what I think was interesting is the birds are actually flat pieces of paper or card,
I didn't
they
guess.
They look 3D, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is really freaky. Oh, it's very cool.
Yeah,
and then
here we have a triptych of sort of Russell Herring's sort of pandemic figures.
Okay.
And so these are sort of drawn from, I think, he makes the faces out of cardboard first, and then sort of with such high quality and sort of pencil draws them.
Are these pencil drawings?
These are pencil drawings. Absolutely. Yeah.
There's a connection between him and Mark Bakey with the hands, in the sense that he's doing a portrait of something inanimate.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's also a connection to Tom Down, because he's kind of making a cardboard model to work back from. So there's and John as well. Yeah. Lots of connections between them, but all kind of manifesting in very different ways.
They're interesting. They're amazingly well drawn, aren't they? Absolutely stunning.
Yeah, I think it's where there must be a certain sort of rubbings to get that sort of smooth effect of it.
They've got a real detail. And you've even got the shadow where you can see it leaning on the table or whatever he's lent it on. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm so fascinated why people prefer drawing their own things they've made than what's out there. It's an intriguing thing.
Well, maybe because you can make it more interesting if you're making it yourself. Maybe that's the secret, that there is an element of control, isn't there, if you are creating the thing that you work back from.
And then also sort of this subject matter is so loose, and so he's taken something that's very playful, and he's sort of just ripped her to create, and then he's then sort of carefully sort of investigated it. Sort of.
Yeah, it's the amount of time and effort invested in drawing something that we would probably just bin, isn't it? That's what's fascinating about it.
Yeah, that is quite. Yeah, there's something.
Should we go up to Gail's?
Yeah. Should we go up to Gail's installations?
So here's Gail's immersive sort of installations.
Really cool up here. Kind of freaky. Keep feeling dizzy when we get in here, but it's kind of in a good way.
Yeah.
But it's
at least you're not screaming this time.
I'm not screaming like your piece.
So Gail sort of a few years ago sort of created a video called Pink City. And she'd used a maquette to sort of set the scene for this video.
Okay.
And so that sort of was the connection I felt for sort of her then sort of being involved in this exhibition. We had discussed the idea of then her turning this into an installation itself, but no, I couldn't be happier with sort of what she's actually, the result of that has been.
The result is really cool, man. I love it because you've got that weird back to front canvas, you've got this bit of tape on the ground that I constantly think I'm going to trip over. And you've got this weird box up here, and I love the shadows off that box.
How it sort of bursts out from the wall, and it's always also set against the perspective of this railway platform.
Oh yeah, that's really clever, I missed that. Oh, so that's a single slide. So that's
these are both still images. That's the moving film.
That's the moving one.
And then these are sort of props from within.
I could have sworn those were moving.
Yeah.
It's like you just think they're all moving. It's kind of weird, actually.
And then also, she has 5 recent pieces which work along. And then the original inspiration for her video is this piece which is framed within the stretcher bar, which is called Pink City. And she's very playful with having it setting on the angle, and also interesting how sort of whenever I've sort of done an installation in this space, I've embraced the window, and sort of Gail's actually made it sort of the outside world is very separate.
Well, you just get a hint of it here, which is kind of cool. I like that.
Yeah,
it's nice, really cool.
So it's nice, sort of
it's very intense when you first enter this room, but then as your eyes adjust to it, so you can sit on the sofa and relax and
chill.
Actually sit back and watch the movies.
It's surprising actually. It's the second time I've been here now, and it's actually weird. There's stuff I hadn't noticed the first time, like this going on over the wall there, and of course you've got the relationship to the Cello Factory beams,
shadows, relation to the architecture.
Yeah, really interesting. Actually. Really nice.
So we're actually watching the video too, so we then discover this sort of performance element to it, with sort of Gail and sort of some of her collaborators sort of actually reacting to sort of the components of the video, and also she mentioned these swinging walls that then create all the sort of angled shadows, which ties into with the angles of all these projections.
Yeah, it's really cool. Really cool. Yeah. Nice. Right, let's roll on. So Juliette, this is the drawing version of one of your maquettes,
this is a drawing I've made, one of a series of drawings I've made based on models of landscapes. So it's not a real place, it's a drawing of a fictional place represented by the model.
Yeah. No, it's cool. And we've discussed that, and the viewers will enjoy the detailed discussion of that. It's really cool. So tell us about this piece.
This is by Sasha Bowles. So I know Sasha as a painter, and it was through curating this show that I became familiar with this side of her practice, which is these fantastical models or sets that she makes. And you can see a real link between these and her paintings. They've got the same kind of characters in them. The space is sort of surreal, immaculate, lots of different references that she brings in. It's a beautiful object, and it was something that I really wanted to include for all those reasons.
No, it's a really weird thing. I mean, it's quite funny because you've got this sort of weird creature with a weird head, and then you've got the pine cone, and then you've got... It's really cool.
It's suggesting a narrative, isn't it? But you don't really ever know exactly what that narrative is. It kind of feels like there's a narrative. It feels like it's a play going on or something, but it's so inscrutable that you can just put so many different interpretations on it.
Sort of the classical elements through sort of this, what looks like it could be some Greek sculpture, but then it's got some mad wig on it, and so on.
Nothing's good without a mad wig, is it?
It's a beautiful stage set.
It's a weird thing because it feels, as well as feeling weird, it feels quite familiar, I think. It has a sort of
I find it quite interesting sort of researching her in the build up to the show, and sort of getting to discover sort of the other work she'd done, and sort of some of them it's a lot more sort of collage based, and so sort of actually sort of building sort of elements into sort of her head like this, and so.
Okay, so this is more like a sort of 3D collage version of some of the pieces.
It does feel like a 3D collage.
Yeah.
Because it's got relief in it as well. It's not purely 3D. She's got kind of relief elements at the back as well.
That's really clever. Nice, and then this is...
this is Kim Kiva. So this artist builds huge 200-gallon water tanks.
As you do.
He has a huge 200-gallon water tank in his studio where he's experimenting with dropping different liquids, substances, dyes into it to create these atmospheric effects. So they become like these, almost in terms of the forms in them, like these sort of Hudson River School paintings. Got this kind of atmosphere in them, and sometimes there appears to be a suggestion of sort of objects in a landscape. In this one, it's slightly more abstract, but you do get the feeling of natural forms element.
Keep on imagining sort of an octopus head or something.
Just popped a couple of eyes here.
Well, whereas I'm seeing it's a wisteria in a landscape.
Good time of year for that.
Like a willow or something. There's always again this idea of you're never quite sure what you're looking at. There's a suggestion, and you're kind of left to project onto it.
It must sort of take sort of hundreds of photos every few seconds, and then sifts through and sort of finds the one that sort of really captures the moment he was after.
But I guess that's a connection that you can make between the works, where using these models and using these model making processes, it is very much left to the viewer to decipher and to decide what they're looking at.
It's weird because you get this feeling it could be like smoke, it could be like sort of weird amorphous forms, but then this bit at the back, that actually looks like a flat wall. You wouldn't necessarily know that's still in the tank. It looks quite...
There's also sort of no reflection at all from the actual tank, so...
It's really weird. But it looks quite touchable as well, don't you think? I feel like you could touch those sort of weird things.
Well, it'd be great to visit the studio and see it in action.
That'd be really cool, actually.
I think you can definitely find images of his studio and the tank online if you're interested in looking at that kind of thing.
Nice. Right, cool. And then let's move on here. This is nice.
So yeah, no, you can imagine sort of a painted stage set, sort of a.
So I met Louise in the Contemporary British Painting Prize. We were showing in that, and that is how I came across her work. And that was after we started discussing this show.
Oh.
So as soon as I saw it, I kind of thought, wow, that's a brilliant fit. So it's, as you say, they're almost like a set, but not so much a stage set, because you're not getting that sense of using flats. It's actually objects that she's found, but also collage together with found images. So you're constantly questioning what you're looking at. Are you looking at a reproduction of an image?
Yeah, it's really weird because you've got it's almost like she's built these things and then she's laid them together with pictures, and that picture slanted at the back, like that piece in the National Gallery. You've got all sorts of weird, and then she's almost playing with that river sense here, isn't she? She's got that blue bit of sort of stuff there.
They read as landscapes, they read as places, but then it's always very evident that they are not real places. They are these constructions.
But does she physically construct and paint them, or is it all sort of from a sort of a planned sort of sketch that she then builds?
I believe these are built.
So she does actually put them all together.
They're sort of assemblages of things that she's then painting back from.
Yeah, because it looks like this is like a little table she's rested stuff on, isn't it? And she's put it together.
I mean, you get a sense that the space is real. Yeah. That everything in it.
She can sort of then decide to enter sort of what she feels is sort of relevant and.
Yeah, within the space that is real, everything. The sort of the trick is, this space isn't real. This is obviously a painted image that she's reproducing.
Yeah, so the space is real, but then within that you've got unreal spaces as well.
Yeah, so it's constantly playing with what's real, what's illusory, what we intended to see as real or illusory.
Because in reality that looks more real than the actual real 3D things in the picture, doesn't it? So that is playing with that real and unreal.
And also, within the image, showing the versatility of her ability to paint, she's able to use lots of different styles. So she's sort of painting, as you say, very realistically there. But then if you look at this one, she's using found images that are in a very much different language of painting.
Yeah, because she's painted this very, very real, hasn't she? And then this, it's weird actually. It's a nice way of playing with the reality. Especially you've got these weird bits like that in the background, you can't quite work out what that is or where it finishes, whether it's leaning against the wall or it's drifting under. It's got a freaky... And this thing itself is just pretty freaky. But because you've got a really nice... That's got a lovely 3D sense to it, and this is so flat. That bit. That's really cool.
So reminds me of sort of a gouache painting on the side. It must be the same medium, sort of.
Almost like from a kid's children's book or something. Yeah. Oh yeah, and you've got that weird box. You're looking through the stuff in that box.
So then, you've got this image here, which, as you say, it could be leaning backwards, but it's suggesting a depth. But at the same time, you're seeing that it's a flat image again. So it's constantly playing with the viewer, which is what I find really interesting.
Yeah, no, it's really cool. It's really good. Now, and then we move on to Suzanne Moxey, who we've chatted with, and potentially Suzanne will appear at this point discussing it.
I think what I'd like to say about this is, because I've known Susie for a long time, but this is a different way of working for her. So it's got similarities to the work that I've known her to be making for a long time, but now she's making these models. It's kind of adding this new layer to the process, and it was interesting talking to her about making the models as well, and
so sort of the actual sort of process that goes into it is integral to the piece. It's wonderful, this sort of mystical world that sort of could never be found in reality is created, but it does force the viewer to believe it is real.
And it's that game again that's inviting you as the viewer to sort of guess what is a real object being photographed, what is an illusion, is this a real space, is this space completely fictional? So it's something that a lot of these works seem to have in common.
No, I agree. I think you should have called the exhibition Real Unreal.
Get real.
Sorry, just move me along. Right.
Get back into the realm.
Right, and this one
We
is...
have Tom down here, sort of, so he sort of creates these sort of cardboard maquettes of sort of trees and sort of then paints them in these sort of distant dark landscapes.
All right, how weird.
Sort of, it's a wonderful sort of painted finish, and sort of it turns out that he actually was in the year below us at Wimbledon, sort of when we did our BA, sort of. So it was great to see him again when he dropped off his works.
Yeah. No, it's beautifully painted, and it is kind of weird, but I wouldn't have known. It's stuck on blue tack, is it? That little thing. Yeah.
It's a little cardboard model that he's made and painted, but it's the idea of making something from scraps of cardboard, but painting it in this beautiful, sort of highly rendered, as you said, the finish on it is sort of, it's elevating something that's sort of minuscule and throwaway into something beautiful and sort of sublime.
But then also having sort of the paintings are sort of quite small, especially the two upstairs.
Do you think there's also an issue with what to paint today? Because, if you go outside and paint a tree that you haven't made yourself, you're sort of drifting yourself into some impressionist kind of position, aren't you? Where if you want to maintain some more complicated creative or position,
if you're
it's
doing
not.
a sort of a photoreal painting of the tree, people nowadays question, why didn't you just photograph it?
Well, exactly.
I think it very much depends on how you paint the tree, but I certainly think that there's a resonance between the fact that people are creating their own worlds and the fact that we've been confined indoors for the past year, and I mean, most of these artists were already working in that way, but certainly it won't have hindered their practice to be able to be not to have access to the world outside because they've created their own...
Lock them up!
They've already created their own universe to paint from, so...
I don't know, looking at the last year though, it's amazing sort of seeing people sort of comment on Instagram about, I just visited my studio for the first time in a year.
Yeah. This isn't it? Yeah, exactly that sort of thing. Right, well, Juliette, of course, can recreate her own world in her studio.
Yeah, so we've already spoken about this again, that this is my big landscape that I've enlarged from my model. So something tiny being blown up into being something large. Again, it's not a real space. It's playing with questions of, it almost feels like it could be real in terms of dimensions. But again, some of the dimensions are not right. And it's obviously referencing sort of, a model, something that's been cut out.
I have to say, we've known each other for a long time, and it's been great seeing sort of recent developments. And so I really wanted to have you sort of do something special here, and for you to make sort of that site-specific installation. So I had the pleasure of seeing your piece at Kennington at that.
I thought you were going to say you had the pleasure of seeing us putting it up.
No, I did make the joke that it had been a while since I'd seen you painting.
Well, yeah,
but yeah,
so. I suppose what I didn't mention was the fact that I did reference the architecture of the Cello Factory deliberately with these big black beams.
It's not such a strong element of the space.
Yeah.
Sort of Gail upstairs, she embraced it, but then also sort of used some tissue to sort of muffle it slightly as well. I guess when projecting the sort of video onto that wall, the video was more integral to the piece than the actual architecture of that sort of angle.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah. Cool. Right, well, let's move on to this one.
This is Jonathan Alabone. Who relates to Tom Down in the sense that he is making work based on a cardboard construction, but very much coming... I discovered an art historian, so you can very much see this in the romantic tradition of painting and drawing, beautifully rendered, but it's a piece of corrugated card, but to all intents and purposes it could be a classical ruin.
Could be Caspar David Friedrich staggering through
that. So I think, again, it's questioning, it looks like it's in an immense landscape, but quite clearly it's not. It's just this idea that you are in a space that is unreal, and that care and attention have been given to something that is essentially throwaway, to create this sort of...
And it makes that piece of cardboard feel massive.
Yes.
Doesn't
sort
it?
Of epic
cardboard. Throughout the show, sort of the idea of scale is really important.
So what's he done? Has he stuck it into something here? I mean,
that is part
do you know, or is that... nobody knows.
All I know is that you can kind of recognise it when you get close to it and you're really investigating it. You recognise it as corrugated card, but you can't quite believe that it kind of draws you in to look at it.
I like these sort of
demands attention.
Sort of the curved sort of edges here, as if sort of it's being whisked off into the wind or something.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Yeah, it's almost you wonder if it could be a bit of a sort of crashed wreckage of an aeroplane or something. But it does look like the cardboard is.
Do that later on.
All right. Okay. That's really cool. Yeah, let's move on. This is
So this is Mark Bakey, another of my selections. So I like the idea that there are different artists in this show that are making almost portraits through objects. So they're replacing the model in the sense of the person, the model, with a model. But you still using that to evoke a sense of identity.
These are sort of actually sort of quite figurative. So I think sort of with this particular piece here, imagine his hand being wrapped in fragile tape. But then also looking at it, sort of you could imagine it as being a figure with a scarf blowing in the wind.
Oh yeah, nice. I like it. Yeah.
It definitely looks kind of anthropomorphism going on.
Yeah.
Amazingly detailed watercolour.
Yeah, stunning.
It's a beautiful technique.
But he also hasn't hidden the technique with sort of the grid pattern that's very apparent. Sort of, it's great when people can embrace actually sort of how they made it. Sort of,
That's really interesting, actually. Yeah, it is a beautifully done watercolour, isn't it? Absolutely. Has he crunched up the fragile sign and just basically painted it, I guess?
He's wrapped it around this hand.
I see, he's wrapped it around something.
Yeah. So the hand is his hand.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Does he always use his own hands?
Well, we've got two in this show where he's done that, but I've seen other of his work where he's not done that. So
okay. Just at the moment. But
it's part of a series.
Okay. No, it's really cool. It's a weird thing, because it looks a bit like a hat or a hand or a.
It could be quite gruesome.
I didn't know how big it was when I first saw the image of it. I saw the images of it and I thought, wow, that's really impressive as a painting. Yeah. And then to see it in person and to have something that should be sort of hand size enlarged to that scale and still have that level of detail and intensity, I thought was very impressive.
Yeah, no, it's a cracking piece of painting. No doubt about it. And then over here to another wonderful piece of painting / sculpture / whatever it is.
Always a painter at heart.
Piece
astral, sort of. Again, so this was completely made with this show in mind, and so again, taking myself out of my comfort zone, looking at it now, sort of like from the different perspectives, with it being a physical object. I find it really quite interesting, and sort of the subtitle of the show is sort of scale, illusion, space. And I think this sort of typifies that sort of subtitle quite nicely with sort of the different angles and sort of movement that it creates, and sort of whether you're looking at something that's sort of representing a vast universal space, or something sort of, again, with my previous works we've discussed it being quite microscopic even, sort of.
No, it does do all that scale, all that thing. It's really cool. I think it's a really cool, one of your really cool piece of work of yours.
I think it fits in the sense that it can be a model for something bigger, because you could get the impression that he could continue making this to expand around the whole gallery. So it's that sense of something potentially incomplete. A bit like, I suppose that's what links it to mine in a way, something that could continue expanding.
Two ways of thinking of whether it's sort of representing my paintings or whether it's representing the concept behind my paintings. But it definitely also has its sort of individual pieces, sort of when it, in the future when it could be exhibited, so I could add to it, or it could take a completely different form, sort of.
It's really cool. It's really cool. I love it. I like it.
Next up, Sam Zeeley, sort of, he was at Wimbledon with us too, sort of, and he's again deals with scale. So you have this sort of blown up paper aeroplane that's actually steel, sort of. His granddad actually sort of helped design Concords, and so that ties in quite nicely with the idea of these aeroplanes. Sort of,
that's really clever.
And so this piece had previously been exhibited outside for a few years, and sort of mostly the sculptures. Sort of, he would have sort of created sort of the finish, sort of with chemicals of a sort of patina rusted finish. But this also then has evolved and also then been in storage for a year. So sort of when he dropped it off, sort of he was checking the finish, and we actually sort of really liked sort of how it was naturally it evolved. But also sort of previously it was exhibited outside, which so it's been in sort of with the elements, but that also meant that it had two forks that had to be angle grinded off. And but nothing
like angle grinding a fork off, is it?
What's interesting about these sculptures is the kind of brevity of how it makes it look like an incredibly simple form. You really get that sense of that sort of basic paper folding. But at the same time, it's large, but also it's the weight of the material. It's just at odds with what it should be, and that's what's really interesting about it.
It's weirdly pretty, I think, as well. Yeah. I mean, it does look folded, but it's got all those lovely colours.
Sort of slightly comes off as if it's still being folded by sort of fitted and sort of. But also, as it's a sculpture, so you've got to look at it from all around. So you can't just have sort of look at it straight on. And sort of when he sort of saw where I decided to position it, he then showed me this sort of. We put a wonderful picture on Instagram of it being professionally photographed from this angle. And the light shadow coming off here sort of really made me sort of interpret the piece in sort of a whole new way of seeing sort of.
Well, it's quite different from the background. From the back, it'd almost be like a heart.
Yeah. So very cold hearts.
Very cold heart. That's the title it should have had.
And then, so next on here we've got Isabel Young. Sort of, I discovered her work for sort of a previous show here. And so sort of again it's scale, so she's miniaturizing instead of expanding, sort of so you have all these laser cut ladders sort of set against this sort of stage box with a beautiful sort of patterning and sort of absolutely sort of stunning pieces sort of and great to have her involved again sort of.
Well, it's quite freaky. She's got all sorts of little drawings and stuff inside as well, haven't you? And little things and little pictures.
The one we're about to see in a minute has even more exciting different elements to it.
It's also interesting to see her playing with the idea of the peep show, because she's got that what looks like a peephole at the back, but also the slits are replacing the peepholes, and they're creating light within the sculpture themselves.
Shadow is so important.
Even look at the wood grain. The wood grain is sort of adding to the movement of it. It's all very, very well. It's just very well conceived. It's just working as a unit on so many different levels.
Yeah, it's just, you're absolutely right. The shadows and the slits cut in, they make it really quite nice. This gives it a real, also highlights the drawing she's got inside it. How many ladders are in there?
Not sure, so we considered about whether I could move it, and then after looking at all the ladders she had installed, I thought, let's just leave it where it is. It was perfect positions, sort of like in height.
Absolutely.
But absolutely wonderful pieces. And it's nice to have sort of so many artists in the show. Sort of the idea of models and maquettes is just really sort of like integral to their practice of the development of the pieces, but also to have sort of physical objects within the show. So I think it's like very important too. And you've got to have that variety within the exhibitions.
No, it's really good. It's really good.
Gail's piece, sort of urban counter, sort of collage, architectural piece, or painting. So it ties in quite nicely to her installation upstairs, sort of, especially with this sort of bright orange square, sort of, which creates a kind of window that sort of that roof or street is shooting over through. Sort of. And she was discussing earlier about how sort of the reworking and sort of how sort of certain elements get lost, but it's still sort of within sort of the importance of the process of that piece.
Yeah, no, it's cool. It's got a brilliant way of dragging you through space and almost taking you through it unwilling, potentially. But no, it's really cool. And it's got a rather nice kind of gentle brick-like colouring.
So it's definitely an urban environment, but you're also pretty scary as if you're floating off into this other world.
A bad moment if that happens.
Terrible earthquake. So Rob, as we go up onto the mezzanine, we get to discover sort of Thomas J. Risley's final sort of homeless man, it's wonderful. The way it's positioned is he always wanted them low, but as you sort of go up the stairs, you do get to see it at dive level. And
that's really nice actually.
And so you then have the two perspectives.
That's another homeless thing.
So it's just all the poor homeless person's belongings sort of left there for the day. It's amazingly well done with sort of the painting out the patterns of sort of the shopping bags and
it's absolutely stunning, isn't it?
Well, the bag lady's always a saying that my mum would go on about.
And yeah, no, they're amazingly high-end pieces. So it's great. So usually he's such a figurative art sort of sculptor, and so to actually sort of seeing him going to these sort of inanimate objects is quite a change of course.
It is actually.
And I think actually at the moment he's working on sort of illustrating a book, and so he's now sort of focusing on a much more sort of 2D practice.
Okay.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens next.
Yeah, really cool pieces.
So also coming up onto the mezzanine, you then suddenly get to experience the show from all these different angles.
Which is sort of nice, isn't it?
Sort of fun.
You get ready to leap off into the...
yeah, especially sort of getting to see sort of Juliette's. And so here we have Samuel Zeeley's sort of sketch for his plain pieces.
Oh, wait,
and so,
does that relate to the sculpture downstairs?
Exactly, yeah, sort of the steel plane downstairs. So sort of here it's a sort of ink and pen sort of sketch, and sort of you can actually see sort of all the different sort of planes that he's made or considering making. Some of these are much larger than sort of the one downstairs, and sort of really overwhelm the viewer. Sort of.
They're much larger than the one downstairs.
Much like so, yeah. So we're talking sort of at least higher than the mezzanine, or sort of. And so he had a show sort of in Mexico a few years ago, and it was very atmospheric, with sort of very sort of dark lighting, sort of and spotlighting sort of on his sort of planes.
Check it out.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds really cool.
And then
nice drawing as well.
Next we have another one by sort of Isabel Young, and so they have that relationship of scale down there, and yet again that's repeated. And so sort of here we have this tiny little sort of chair set on a...
She's the pieces with the ladders in it?
Exactly, yes.
Oh, what a freaky different piece of work.
Yeah, so this, it's a sort of photograph print, but it's playing with the same idea of sort of, is this a cliff or is this a sort of a small rock with a tiny chair? And
That's quite freaky, isn't it?
Obviously with the models downstairs, it's very apparent sort of that it's a shrunken scale. When here, sort of the viewer, sort of if you hadn't seen those previous models, you'd have absolutely no idea at all. And so that's part of the mystery.
And how did the chair get
well,
there?
I'm imagining that it's only actually about the rock's only about this big and the chair's about that big, and so it's a set scene.
That's actually really weird. It'd be actually quite nice to know how big the chair is.
Well, I think you'll probably find that the chair is in one of those. So yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, no, there's a few chairs in there too.
Oh,
are there? Yeah.
Oh, I didn't realise that. Because that chair's quite detailedly made.
Oh, they're really high end, sort of with the sort of laser cut timber.
Amazing. Of course, it's a laser cut. That's how you get that accuracy.
So, Juliette, would you like to join us up here? And so so here we have sort of two pieces by Tom Down. We're also next to these sort of two by sort of Jonathan Alabone. And so Jonathan, we looked at his pencil drawing downstairs, and then here are actual paintings. And there's a lovely relationship between them both, and it's nice to have them both sort of paired.
It's really interestingly painted. You can't quite tell how.
Well, it's actually sort of, I think there's a panel board behind it, so it's on linen, but then the panel sort of keeps it completely taut, and then so it allows him to get this sort of wonderful finish.
So you build that surface up in layers, isn't it?
Yeah. You can just see a sort of a crescent of sort of the gesso primer behind.
Yeah, but it has got a really good. It's got almost. It feels like it's sucking the light into it.
Yeah. But also, if you look carefully, you can actually even see the cardboard rims or the edges.
That's what I just noticed. You can see the edge of the cardboard. It's really clever.
So we kind of paired these not only because thematically they link, but also it's almost a contrast in painting styles, because this again is looking at kind of old master imagery that look like ruins again, but painted in a much kind of looser, sketchier way than obviously Tom's, but equally sort of beautifully rendered. So it's just quite a nice relationship between these two and those two.
Yeah, no, they've got
They've got a really
very sort of earthy colours.
Wait, so this is the guy downstairs doing the faces in the car?
No. This is the guy.
Is that? That's what I thought.
With the cardboard.
The cardboard in the desert.
So these are sitting really nicely here, partly because of the light, because the light sort of inherent within them is so sort of, kind of ethereal, I suppose is the word.
Yeah.
But
they've got that pink ground coming through.
Seeing them with the natural light hitting them, it really sets off the colours that you show them.
That's really cool.
The final three pieces.
Final three. Come on, everybody.
So we've got Susie again with Blue Door, which you discussed in detail earlier.
It's a cool picture. I still find it fascinating, like that mirror in the centre is actually just a big piece of paper.
I had no idea that was the case.
Piece of paper. You had no idea.
Also, that play of two mirrors too, sort of making this sort of both perspectives are impossible to have it happen at once.
But then, and then you look at it from a distance, and it has still got this kind of set-like quality to it. It could be any size, couldn't it? Really, it could be a real room, or it could actually be a sort of mock-up of a room. It's really difficult to tell.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I love the way she's got the leaves dangling on wire from her leaf collection.
It's lovely with those little painted elements.
Definitely.
Well, that's very cool.
Yeah. So should we move on to the last two?
So I think one of us have to get our phones out for this.
You've got
And so, here is...
oh, wow.
It does make a big difference shining a light in the top.
Yeah.
That is so weird.
So this is Melanie Miller.
So Melanie is an artist that works a lot with natural forms, and she just had a solo show where she showed a lot of these boxes where they are informing the paintings, not directly, but in quite subtle ways. So you can see the kind of oval of that. Yeah. The kind of light effects you get in that being replicated in the colours that she's choosing and the forms that she's choosing in this. There's not a direct, it's not one is... She's not copying that to produce the painting. So that's a difference between her and the other painters that we've looked at. It's far more, the boxes are something
they have that relationship with the way we've exhibited them, sort of both at sort of the same levels or on a centre point. It sort of then draws that sort of the natural feel from the birdsness through to her sort of landscapes and so on.
So I mean, in her studio, she's got a studio on the island that I've got a studio on, and it is full of these kind of natural structures that she's collected. So the whole thing, the whole studio is almost like one giant box.
Of crazy stuff.
Yeah.
So is that a real bird's nest?
Yes.
It is.
So she finds things like this, obviously disused ones. She's not.
She's not touched those birds.
But she finds things like this, and they might not then be directly referenced, but she sort of collects them, and they will sort of inspire something in terms of either a composition or a colour scheme or something. So it's a much more kind of subtle way of using an assemblage of things that you're interested in as a reference or a maquette for a painting.
Well, what's interesting is she's actually sort of exhibited the inspiration as part of the whole thing, which is kind of nice because you see the history of the sort of thought process, don't you, going through
that
it.
was probably us that did that. You could have exhibited the painting completely separately and the box completely separately, but there is a relationship between them which is interesting.
You curator geniuses.
We've been a good team, so it's also great to then look out across the show from here, sort of. And Juliette, absolutely stunning sort of piece at the end, and cool. Sort of obviously I like mine too, with all sort of the different angle from this point, and I always find sort of when sort of trying to record these shows, I'm looking at all different possible perspectives, and sort of I find that sort of sticking your head between sort of the mezzanine gap here, you get some great shots from downstairs.
Good. I'll picture that later. So both of you, do you want to sum up your sort of feelings of the show? Juliette, do you want to go first?
I mean, we really were able to just decide where everything was going to go within a couple of hours, because it just naturally fell into place. The relationships between works, the colour relationships, and the thematic relationships.
But also sort of with co-creating, sort of there's throughout the 2 years we've sent sort of countless emails. But and it's also great that we've both sort of approached it from different sort of angles, and sort of and it's actually it's resulted in something that's really varied and sort of has so many different sort of reference points to the subject matter. Yeah, definitely. I think all together it's come across very well as a whole, and we're really pleased with the way it looks. Yeah.
So 2 years to get it all done.
Well, it would have been a year. There was a small matter of pandemic.
But no, I think there's sort of having an extra year has been sort of very beneficial.
Having an extra year has been very useful for me in terms of getting all that work done for the thing, which I was working on in conjunction with another one. So I would have had to have really put in late nights if I'd done it in a year.
I think even sort of with my piece, I'd only sort of decided to buy a mitre saw to create these triangles over Christmas. Sort of like originally I was going to be trying to hand cut all of these saws, which would have been an absolute nightmare. Luckily, sort of getting to speak to people that sort of have a knowledge of how these things could be produced, and then and so it's worked out really well. And yeah.
No, I think it's really cool. I think it's a really interesting show. I mean, you've got real nice paintings. You've got this amazing sort of giant drawing that you can get lost in, but then you've got the sculpture, like the big bronze here, but also the tiny little bronze sculptures as well. Yeah. It's got a really interesting. It's interesting what Model Maquette, what actually comes out of it, and all the different things that are in there. And I like the sense of sort of reality changing as you move back and forth between these models that are kind of in reality and not in reality at the same time. And how you're transforming the universe.
It's been quite an investigation of the subject matter. So,
No, it's really cool. Well, everybody hopefully has come to see it, and if they haven't, they can now see it on arttop10.com.
Thank you, Rob.
So please like and subscribe.
Bumbuckler.